Millionaire woman gets pregnant of her black manservant. What she does next is shocking. Facing an unplanned pregnancy, she makes choices that defy expectations and challenge societal norms, leading to unforeseen consequences. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The September evening wrapped Manhattan's Upper East Side in a gentle warmth as Claire Thompson's townhouse buzzed with activity. Crystal glasses clinked, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air as New York's elite gathered for her annual autumn cocktail party. Claire stood near the grand staircase, wearing a tailored black dress that spoke of understated wealth. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. From her position, she had a clear view of the entire room, including Marcus, who moved efficiently between guests with a silver tray of champagne flutes. He was newer to her staff, hired 6 months ago on the recommendation of her head housekeeper. At 28, he was several years younger than Claire, but carried himself with a quiet confidence that set him apart from the other serving staff. Claire noticed how he anticipated guests' needs before they voiced them, appearing with fresh drinks or taking empty glasses with subtle precision. His dark eyes occasionally met hers across the room, and in those brief moments, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't the usual employer-employee dynamic. There was a depth to their silent exchanges that made Claire's heart beat faster. As she conversed with Richard Whitman, a hedge fund manager who'd been trying to catch her attention for months, Claire found her focus drifting to Marcus's movements. She responded to Richard's market analysis with appropriate nods, but her attention kept returning to the way Marcus handled himself among her wealthy friends, maintaining dignity despite their occasional condescension. The party wound down near midnight. The last guests departed in their luxury cars, leaving behind empty glasses and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. Claire found herself in the kitchen, where the staff was cleaning up. Marcus was loading the dishwasher, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "You did well tonight," Claire said, surprising herself by initiating conversation. The other staff had already left for the night. Marcus straightened up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I enjoy these events. They're educational." "Educational?" Claire leaned against the counter, curious. People reveal themselves at parties. When they're comfortable, surrounded by wealth and power, they show who they really are. His observation wasn't bitter, just matter of fact. Claire smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. "And what have you learned about me?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "That you're different. You see people, really see them. It's rare in your world." The conversation shifted to their backgrounds. Claire found herself sharing things she rarely discussed. Her pressure to maintain the Thompson family legacy, her secret desire to make a meaningful impact beyond charity galas. Marcus spoke of his immigrant parents, his college education earned through scholarships, and his aspiration to start a community outreach program. Hours passed as they talked. The kitchen's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, but Claire had never felt more comfortable. There was no pretense between them, no social dancing around topics. It was refreshing, dangerous, and thrilling all at once. 2 weeks later, Claire sat in her private doctor's office, staring at the results of her routine checkup. The word pregnant stood out starkly on the paper. Her hands trembled slightly as the reality sank in. The night after the party, the wine, the continued conversation in her study, Marcus's gentle touch, it had led to this moment. Dr. Patterson waited patiently as Claire processed the news. "You're about 6 weeks along," she said gently. "All initial indicators look healthy." Claire touched her flat stomach, a mix of emotions washing over her. Fear tangled with an unexpected joy, anxiety with excitement. The implications were enormous. She, Claire Thompson, was carrying her employee's child. The scandal it would cause, the disappointment from her family, the whispers in their social circle. Yet underneath all that, a small voice whispered that this might be exactly what her carefully constructed life needed. Something real, unplanned, and completely authentic. Claire sat in her mother's sun-drenched breakfast room in Greenwich, Connecticut, watching Margaret Thompson's face transform from polite interest to horror. The delicate bone china teacup in her mother's hand clattered against its saucer. Marcus? The server? Margaret's voice carried the sharp edge of disbelief. Claire, have you completely lost your mind? This isn't some romantic comedy where the maid ends up with a millionaire. This is your life, our family's reputation. Claire had expected this reaction, but the reality of her mother's disappointment still stung. He's educated, Mom. He has a degree from, I don't care if he has a PhD from Harvard, Margaret cut in. He's an employee. Do you have any idea what this will do to your position in society? What about the foundation? The board members won't take kindly to this indiscretion. The word indiscretion hung in the air between them. Claire straightened her spine, feeling the first surge of defensive anger. This isn't an indiscretion. It's my child. There are ways to handle these situations discreetly, Margaret said, lowering her voice despite them being alone in the house. I know a very private clinic in Switzerland. Stop. Claire stood up, her chair scraping against the marble floor. That's not an option. I'm keeping this baby. The following weekend, the Thompson family gathered for their monthly dinner at Claire's grandfather's estate in the Hamptons. The sprawling property had hosted generations of Thompson family events, each one carefully orchestrated to maintain their social standing. Claire felt the weight of scrutiny as she declined wine at dinner. Her Aunt Charlotte's eyebrows rose slightly. Her cousin Rebecca whispered something to her husband. The news of her pregnancy wasn't public yet, but family had a way of sensing these things. Claire, dear, her grandfather William called from the head of the table. I heard the Wellington Group is interested in partnering with your foundation. Their CEO's son is quite accomplished. Perhaps you should consider. I'm pregnant, Claire announced, cutting through the carefully constructed matchmaking attempt. The dining room fell silent. Silver forks stopped midway to mouths. Her mother's face went pale. William Thompson set down his wine glass slowly. I see. And the father? Before Claire could answer, Margaret jumped in. It's being handled, Father. Claire understands the delicacy of the situation. No, Mom, it's not being handled. Claire looked around the table, meeting each family member's gaze. I'm having this baby, and I'm not hiding it. Marcus is the father, and while I don't expect you to understand or approve, I do expect you to respect my decision. The aftermath of her announcement was predictable. Charlotte excused herself with a sudden headache. Rebecca began furiously typing on her phone, no doubt updating her society friends. William retreated to his study, a clear sign of his disapproval. Later that night, in her Manhattan apartment, Claire began researching single motherhood. She ordered books on pregnancy, joined online forums for expectant mothers, and started making lists of necessary preparations. Her home office transformed into a planning center, with sticky notes covering one wall. She drafted emails to her foundation's board members, preparing them for the news. She researched companies with progressive family policies, considering how to restructure her own organization to better support working parents. If society was going to judge her, she'd use their attention to highlight issues that mattered. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends who'd heard rumors. Each one masked their judgment and false concern. Darling, are you okay? Do you need to talk? I know a wonderful therapist. Claire turned off her phone and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Central Park. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach. For the first time in her life, she felt truly in control, even as everything around her seemed to spiral. She wasn't just defying her family's expectations. She was choosing to live authentically, regardless of the cost. On a quiet Sunday morning, Claire invited Marcus to her private garden terrace, a sanctuary rarely shared with others. The autumn air was crisp, and the city sprawled below them like a distant dream. Marcus arrived wearing casual clothes, jeans and a gray sweater that made him look more like the graduate student he'd once been than her employee. I've been reading about co-parenting, Claire said, getting straight to the point. She gestured to the chair across from her. We should talk about what that means for us. Marcus sat down, his usual composure slightly shaken. I've been doing research too. I want to be involved, but I know the situation is complicated. Tell me about your family, Claire said, surprising him. Not the basics I know from your employment file. Tell me about who you really are. Over the next few hours, Marcus revealed his story. His parents had immigrated from Colombia when he was 5. His father, an engineer in their home country, took jobs as a maintenance worker while studying English at night. His mother cleaned houses, including those of families like Claire's, to help pay for his education. "We lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens," Marcus explained. "My parents slept in the living room, so I could have the bedroom with my books. They believed education was the key to everything." Claire listened, seeing how his experiences had shaped him. "And now, working here instead of using your degree. I'm saving to start a community center," he admitted. "The kind of place I needed when I was a kid. Working here pays better than entry-level nonprofit jobs. Every dollar goes into that dream." The honesty of his ambition touched something in Claire. She shared her own struggles, the pressure of being a Thompson, the endless expectations, the loneliness of living in a world where relationships were often transactions. "I never felt I could trust anyone's motives," she confessed. "Every man I dated seemed more interested in my last name than in me." The following week, Claire visited the Brooklyn Mother Support Center, a place far removed from her usual social circuit. The waiting room was filled with women from all backgrounds, their pregnancies in various stages. A teenager nervously filled out forms. A woman in scrubs dozed in a chair, clearly between shifts. Sarah, the center's director, welcomed Claire without the fawning deference she was used to. "Everyone here has their own story," Sarah explained, leading her through the facility. "But they all need the same thing, support without judgment." Claire attended a group session where women shared their fears and hopes. A corporate lawyer spoke about workplace discrimination. A retail worker discussed her struggles with healthcare costs. A teacher shared her anxiety about balancing work and motherhood. For the first time, Claire felt part of something real. These women didn't care about her net worth or social status. They saw her as another mother-to-be, facing her own challenges. Later that evening, Marcus came to her study to discuss some household matters. The conversation naturally shifted to their shared future. "My father used to say that real strength isn't in never falling," Marcus said, "but in how you get back up." He hesitated, then added, "When I was 12, we lost everything in a fire. No insurance. We lived in a shelter for 3 months." "How did you handle it?" Claire asked. "The community helped us. People we'd never met brought clothes, books, food. That's when I learned that true wealth isn't about money. It's about connection." Claire felt something shift inside her. Here was someone who understood both struggle and resilience, who saw wealth as something more than numbers in a bank account. They talked until midnight, planning not just for the baby, but for the kind of world they wanted their child to know. A world where privilege came with responsibility, where success was measured by impact rather than income. Marcus spoke of his dreams for the community center, after-school programs, job training, ESL classes. Claire found herself drawing on her business expertise, helping him refine his plans, seeing how their different worlds could complement each other. The confrontation with Margaret Thompson took place in her mother's private sitting room, where generations of Thompson women had made life-altering decisions. Claire stood by the window, while her mother paced the Persian carpet, her Hermes scarf trailing behind her like a battle flag. "You don't understand what you're risking," Margaret said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I've spent decades protecting this family's reputation." "Protecting it from what, Mom? From reality? From actual human connections?" Claire turned to face her mother. "I'm tired of living behind this perfect facade." Margaret stopped pacing, her hand clutching the back of a Louis XV chair. "You think I don't know about real life? About difficult choices?" Her voice cracked slightly. "When I was your age, I was in love with a man who worked at your grandfather's company, David Chun. He was brilliant, innovative, and entirely unsuitable according to your grandfather." The revelation hung in the air. Claire stared at her mother, seeing her differently. "What happened?" "I did what was expected. I married your father, maintained our social position, gave you every advantage." Margaret's eyes grew distant. "David went on to found his own technology company. He's worth billions now, but back then..." She shook her head. "Sometimes I wonder. That's exactly why I can't follow the same path," Claire said softly. "I won't spend my life wondering what if." The conversation shifted something in their relationship. Though Margaret didn't approve, a new understanding emerged between them. Energized by this revelation about her family's past, Claire threw herself into social activism. She began attending community board meetings in underprivileged neighborhoods, listening to residents' concerns about gentrification and lack of resources. During one such meeting in the Bronx, Claire announced a new initiative through her foundation, a grant program for small businesses owned by single parents. The room's initial skepticism gave way to cautious hope as she outlined the details. "This isn't charity," she explained to the gathered crowd. "It's investment in our community's future." Her hand rested unconsciously on her growing belly as she spoke. It was at this meeting that she met Darnell Washington, a community organizer who had known Marcus since college. Darnell initially regarded her with suspicion, but as they talked, he recognized her genuine commitment to change. "Marcus told me about you," Darnell said after the meeting, "but I had to see it for myself. Most rich folks who come here are looking for tax write-offs or photo ops." Claire appreciated his honesty. "I'm learning that I've lived in a bubble. Help me understand what this community really needs." Over the next few weeks, Darnell became an invaluable ally. He showed Claire the reality behind the statistics, the struggling single mothers working multiple jobs, the talented teenagers lacking opportunities, the small business owners fighting to survive. Together, they began planning a comprehensive support network. Claire's business acumen, combined with Darnell's community knowledge, created a powerful partnership. They developed programs for job training, childcare support, and small business incubation. "You're not what I expected," Darnell admitted during one of their planning sessions. "When Marcus first told me about you, I thought you were just another socialite having a rebellious phase." Claire laughed. "A few months ago, you might have been right. But this pregnancy, it's made me question everything I thought I knew about privilege and responsibility." Through Darnell, Claire began to see how her wealth could be truly transformative when directed with understanding and respect for the communities it served. She started attending local church services, community festivals, and neighborhood cleanup events, not as a benefactor, but as a participant. The society pages took notice of her absence from the usual charity circuit. Rumors circulated about her strange behavior. But for the first time in her life, Claire felt she was doing something meaningful rather than merely maintaining appearances. Marcus found himself increasingly caught between two worlds. During the day, he maintained his role as Claire's employee, efficiently managing the household staff and maintaining professional boundaries. But in private moments, he was experiencing the complex emotions of becoming a father while navigating an unprecedented social situation. One evening, as he oversaw dinner preparations in the kitchen, he overheard two maids whispering about the pregnancy. Their words stung: gold digger, social climber, taking advantage. He kept his composure, but later, alone in his small apartment in Queens, the weight of judgment pressed heavily on him. Claire noticed his internal struggle. "You don't have to keep working here," she said during one of their evening conversations. "I can help you start your community center now." "No, Marcus replied firmly. "I need to do that on my own terms." "But," he hesitated, "I do need to figure out my role in all of this. Not just with the baby, but with you, with this whole situation." Claire was planning a fundraising gala for her new community initiatives, and she made a bold decision. Instead of hiring an external event coordinator, she asked Marcus to co-organize it, leveraging his understanding of both worlds they inhabited. The event was scheduled at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a venue that would draw the wealthy donors Claire needed while making a statement about art and culture belonging to everyone. Marcus worked alongside Claire, transforming from service staff to partner, though not everyone accepted this transition gracefully. "Mr. Reynolds," Marcus addressed an old money board member who had been deliberately ignoring him, "I believe you'll be interested in our plans for the youth mentorship program." His quiet confidence and detailed knowledge of the initiative forced reluctant respect. Claire watched these interactions with a mixture of pride and protective anger. She saw how Marcus handled each slight with dignity, how he turned skeptics into supporters through sheer competence and genuine passion for the work. The night of the gala arrived. Claire wore a midnight blue gown that elegantly draped over her visible pregnancy. Marcus chose a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he belonged among the city's elite. Yet it was their natural chemistry that drew attention. The way they finished each other's sentences during presentations, their synchronized movements through the crowd, the subtle touches and shared glances. They move like dancers, Claire overheard one guest comment. Perhaps this isn't just some scandal after all. The event highlighted projects that bridged social divides, scholarship programs, business inc. Ubater's affordable housing initiatives. Marcus spoke eloquently about his own journey and the importance of creating opportunities for talented individuals regardless of their background. Success shouldn't depend on which side of Fifth Avenue you were born on, he said to the assembled crowd. His words resonated, opening checkbooks and minds simultaneously. But not everyone was convinced. Claire noticed the whispered conversations behind raised champagne glasses, the speculative glances, the way some of her oldest friends found reasons to be elsewhere when she approached. The society columnist from the New York Times circled the event like a shark, noting every interaction between Claire and Marcus. The next day's article would undoubtedly analyze every detail, searching for signs of scandal or authenticity. Toward the end of the evening, as the orchestra played and couples moved onto the dance floor, Marcus approached Claire. The moment hung in the balance. Would they maintain professional distance or acknowledge the growing personal connection between them? Claire made the decision, taking his offered hand. As they danced, the room seemed to hold its breath. They moved together naturally, their bodies finding a rhythm that spoke of intimacy and understanding. It was a public declaration without words, a statement that couldn't be misinterpreted. "They're all watching," Marcus murmured. "Let them," Claire replied. "I'm tired of hiding what's real." After the gala, Claire found her mother waiting in her study, holding an old leather-bound journal. Margaret's usual perfectly composed appearance showed signs of strain. Her hair slightly disheveled, her hands trembling as she handled the worn book. "I need to show you something," Margaret said, opening the journal. "These are my diaries from 1985. She turned to a marked page and began reading about her relationship with David Shun, revealing a love story that paralleled Claire's current situation in striking ways. "He was brilliant with numbers, with people," Margaret's voice softened. "Your grandfather's company was struggling, and David proposed innovative solutions that saved millions. But when we fell in love," she closed the journal. "Your grandfather threatened to withdraw all support from the company if I continued seeing him. Hundreds of people would have lost their jobs." Claire sat across from her mother, seeing the pain still fresh after all these years. "So you chose duty over love." "I chose what I thought was right at the time," Margaret corrected. "But I've spent 30 years wondering if there was another way. Watching you with Marcus, it's like seeing my past play out again, but this time it's different," Claire finished. "The world is different." Later that night, Claire found Marcus in the nursery they were preparing. He was assembling a crib, refusing help from the household staff. The sight of him, sleeves rolled up, instructions spread across the floor, made her pause in the doorway. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, voicing her fears for the first time. "Not the pregnancy or the birth, but being a mother. My own mother tried so hard to be perfect that she forgot to be real. What if I make the same mistakes?" Marcus set down his screwdriver and crossed the room to her. "You're already different. You're choosing a harder path because it's authentic. That's what our child needs to see. Not perfection, but truth." His words touched something deep inside her. Claire found herself crying, months of tension releasing. "Everyone has expectations about who I should be, who we should be. Then let's disappoint them all," Marcus smiled, wiping her tears. "Let's be ourselves instead." The conversation shifted to their future. Marcus shared his own fears about being judged as an opportunist, about providing for their child, about maintaining his identity in Claire's world while not losing sight of his roots. "I won't let you V up your dreams," Claire insisted. "The community center, your independence, they're part of who you are." "They're part of what?" She hesitated, then continued. "Part of what I love about you." It was the first time either of them had used that word. It hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and complication. As her pregnancy progressed, Claire found herself increasingly torn between two visions of her future. One was safe, predictable. She could still return to her old life, maintain appearances, raise her child within the protective bubble of wealth and privilege. The other was uncertain but alive with possibility, a life with Marcus, building something new, challenging the very foundations of her world. Her family's influence still held considerable power. Board members hinted at concerns about the foundation's leadership. Longtime donors questioned her judgment. Society friends began excluding her from their inner circles. The pressure mounted as her due date approached. Margaret made one last attempt to reason with her daughter, presenting a detailed plan for handling the situation appropriately. The proposal included a generous trust fund for Marcus, a carefully crafted press release about mutual decision-making, and a co-parenting arrangement that would keep everyone in their proper places. Claire read the proposal in her study, feeling the weight of generations of Thompson women who had chosen duty over desire. She thought of her mother's hidden love story, of Marcus assembling a crib by hand, of the life growing inside her, a life that would inherit either her courage or her compromise. Instead of the traditional baby shower at the Plaza Hotel that Thompson women had hosted for generations, Claire and Marcus planned an intimate gathering at a community center in Queens. The space was transformed with simple decorations, filled with a mix of guests that would have been unthinkable at any previous Thompson family event. Darnell helped organize the celebration, bringing together Marcus's family, community center volunteers, and a select group of Claire's friends who had stood by her. The contrast was striking. Immigrant families sharing space with Manhattan socialites, nonprofit workers mingling with corporate executives. Claire's mother arrived late, standing uncertainly in the doorway. She watched as Marcus's mother, Elena, taught some of Claire's friends how to make traditional Colombian baby blankets. The genuine warmth and joy in the room seemed to affect Margaret, softening her usual rigid posture. "Your grandmother would have a heart attack," Margaret commented, accepting a piece of cake from a paper plate, something Claire had never seen her do before. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Claire replied. "Look around, Mom. This is real. These are real connections, real relationships." The celebration was interrupted by the arrival of William Thompson III, Claire's grandfather, his unexpected presence causing a hush to fall over the room. He surveyed the scene with an unreadable expression, his eyes lingering on Marcus, who stood protectively near Claire. "I receive an interesting call," William announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "The Wellington Group is threatening to withdraw their support from our foundation unless we—" He paused significantly, handled the situation more discreetly. Claire felt Marcus tense beside her. This was the moment she had been dreading, her grandfather wielding his considerable influence to force her hand. But before she could respond, Margaret stepped forward. "Father," she said, her voice stronger than Claire had ever heard it, "I watched you destroy my chance at happiness 30 years ago. I won't let you do the same to my daughter." The room collectively held its breath. William Thompson turned to his daughter, surprise briefly crossing his features. "Margaret, Davidson wasn't just an employee, was he? He was a threat to your control, just like Marcus is now." Margaret's words carried decades of suppressed truth. "But times have changed, Father, and so have we." Elena, Marcus's mother, moved to stand beside Claire. "My son," she said in accented English, "has worked since he was 14 to build a better life. He earned his education. He dreams of helping others. Is this not what you want for your great-grandchild? Someone who understands both privilege and purpose." Claire watched as these two mothers, one who had sacrificed love for duty, another who had sacrificed everything for her child's future, faced down one of New York's most powerful men. The moment stretched, tension building, until William Thompson did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Not his usual controlled chuckle, but a genuine laugh that seemed to release years of rigid control. "Well," he said, looking around the room, "it appears the Thompson legacy is evolving whether I approve or not." He turned to Marcus. "Young man, I look forward to hearing more about this community center of yours. Perhaps the Wellington Group's funding could be better directed there." The celebration resumed, but with a subtle shift. Barriers that had seemed insurmountable just moments before began to dissolve. Claire watched as her grandfather engaged in an animated discussion with Darnell about urban development. while Margaret and Elena exchanged recipes and grandmother advice. As the evening wound down, Marcus pulled Claire aside. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "Everything's going to change." Claire looked at their gathered families, her mother laughing with his, her grandfather taking notes as Darnell spoke, their friends creating new connections across social divides. "Everything already has," she replied. At 7 months pregnant, Claire woke to sharp pains in the middle of the night. The city lights flickered through her bedroom window as she reached for her phone, instinctively dialing Marcus's number before calling her doctor. Within an hour, she was in Manhattan Presbyterian's private wing, monitors beeping steadily as doctors expressed concern about her elevated blood pressure. The pregnancy, previously uncomplicated, had suddenly become high risk. "You'll need to remain on bed rest," Dr. Patterson explained, reviewing the test results. "The stress levels in your system are dangerously high." Marcus arrived still wearing his running clothes, having rushed from his morning workout. He found Claire staring out the hospital window, her hands protectively curved around her stomach. "The foundation board meeting is tomorrow," she said without turning. "The Wellington Group representatives will be there, and the benefit gala for the community center is next week." "I can't just stop," Marcus interrupted, pulling a chair beside her bed. "Everything else can wait." But Claire's mind raced with all the responsibilities hanging in the balance. The community center's construction had begun, funded by a combination of her family's foundation and new investors Marcus had impressed. Programs were being developed, staff hired. Their personal story had inspired others, creating momentum they couldn't afford to lose. During her mandated hospital stay, Darnell visited, bringing updates about the community center project. "The contractors hit some permit issues," he reported, watching Claire's face carefully. "But I think there's something else going on. Someone's putting pressure on the city council." Claire recognized the tactics: subtle interference, bureaucratic delays, the invisible hand of power pushing back against change. She'd seen her grandfather use similar methods over the years. "Give me my laptop," she instructed Marcus. "If I have to stay in this bed, I can at least make some calls." But Marcus hesitated. The doctor said to avoid stress. "Let me handle this." "How?" "You don't have the connections." "No," he agreed, "but I understand how to build them. Trust me." Later, that evening, Darnell returned with unexpected news. He'd spent the day meeting with community leaders, local business owners, and even some of Claire's society friends who had come to support their cause. A coalition was forming, pushing back against the opposition. "People are invested in this story," Darnell explained. "It's not just about you and Marcus anymore. It's about breaking down barriers, proving change is possible." As Claire listened to Darnell describe how different parts of the city were coming together, immigrant business owners, society philanthropists, community activists, she felt a shift in her perspective. Their relationship had sparked something larger than themselves. During a quiet moment when they were alone, Claire confessed her deeper fears to Darnell. "What if we're doing this all wrong? What if trying to bridge these worlds is putting too much pressure on everyone, especially the baby?" Darnell considered her words carefully. "My grandmother used to say that nothing worth doing comes easy. But she also said you don't have to carry every burden yourself." He leaned forward in his chair. "You and Marcus are trying to create something new, something that challenges how things have always been. That's going to make waves. But look at how many people are willing to help calm those waters." The following night, lying in her hospital bed, Claire made a decision. She began drafting a speech. Not the carefully diplomatic statement she usually delivered at foundation events, but something raw and honest. If she was going to be forced to rest, she would use this time to prepare for the moment she could stand up and speak her truth. "What are you working on?" Marcus asked, returning with tea. "Our story," Claire replied. "Not the version everyone expects, but the real one. About fear and courage, about choosing love over tradition, about building bridges instead of walls." She looked up at him. "Will you help me tell it?" The Metropolitan Museum's Grand Hall buzzed with anticipation. After 3 weeks of bed rest, Claire had been cleared to attend the Foundation's annual gala, though she remained under strict instructions to limit her activity. At 8 months pregnant, she commanded attention in a custom-designed gown that embraced rather than concealed her condition. The evening's guest list reflected the changing dynamics of New York society. Traditional power players mingled with community leaders, creating an unprecedented mixture of backgrounds and perspectives. The Wellington Group's representatives watched from a corner, their disapproval barely concealed behind champagne flutes. Marcus moved through the crowd with newfound confidence, no longer wearing the uniform of service but a tailored tuxedo that marked him as a guest. He had spent the past weeks managing the community center project, proving himself capable of navigating both bureaucratic challenges and social politics. "Ladies and gentlemen," Claire began her address, standing at the podium despite her doctor's concerns. The room fell silent. Tonight marks a turning point, not just for the Thompson Foundation, but for how we view progress in our city. She paused, her hand resting on her stomach, feeling her child move as if in response to her voice. The prepared speech sat untouched on the podium. "We've all heard the whispers," she continued, her voice strong. "The speculation about my choices, about my relationship with Marcus, about the future of this foundation. Tonight, I want to address those whispers directly." The audience stirred uncomfortably. This wasn't the carefully scripted presentation they had expected. For generations, the Thompson family has represented a certain kind of success, measured in dollars, influence, and carefully maintained social boundaries. "We've done good work, helped many people, but always from a safe distance. Always from behind the walls we built to separate us from them." Claire looked directly at her grandfather, who sat in the front row. "But those walls are crumbling. They're crumbling because they must. Because the real strength of our city, of any community, lies not in maintaining divisions, but in breaking them down." She gestured to Marcus, who moved to join her at the podium. "When I fell in love with Marcus, many called it a scandal. Some still do. But what they fail to see is that our story represents something larger than ourselves. It represents the possibility of genuine connection across the artificial barriers we've created." The room was absolutely still now, hundreds of eyes fixed on the couple standing together. "Marcus isn't just the father of my child. He's my partner in creating a new vision for what community support can look like. The Thompson Ramirez Community Center isn't just another charity project. It's a model for how different parts of our city can work together, learn from each other, grow stronger through genuine partnership." Some members of the audience began to applaud, led by Darnell and the community leaders present. Others, particularly the old guard, remained stone-faced. "To those who have supported us, thank you. To those who have doubted us, watch what we build. And to those who would maintain the old barriers." Claire's voice grew stronger. "Your time is passing. The future belongs to those brave enough to reach across divides, to see people as people, not as categories or classes." The applause grew, drowning out the murmurs of protest from some corners. Margaret Thompson dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, while William Thompson sat straight-backed, a complex mix of emotions playing across his usually stoic face. But as Claire prepared to continue her speech, a commotion at the back of the hall drew everyone's attention. A figure pushed through the crowd, moving with determined purpose toward the podium. Through the parting crowd walked James Wellington III, heir to the Wellington Group and Claire's former fiancé from 3 years ago. His presence caused an immediate stir. They had broken off their engagement under mysterious circumstances that had never been fully explained to society. "Claire," his voice carried across the now silent room, "I can't let you continue this charade." Marcus moved protectively closer to Claire, but she placed a gentle hand on his arm. She had known this moment might come, had perhaps even been waiting for it. James reached the podium, his expensive suit and commanding presence a stark reminder of the world Claire had chosen to challenge. "Tell them the truth," he demanded, his voice tight with emotion. "Tell them who really fathered your child." The gasp that rippled through the room was audible. Margaret Thompson half rose from her seat, while William Thompson's face darkened with anger. Claire looked out at the shocked faces, at Marcus standing steady beside her, at Darnell and the community leaders who had become true friends, at her mother who had finally begun to understand the price of living behind walls. "You're right, James," Claire said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "The truth should be told." She turned to face the audience. 3 years ago, James and I were engaged. During that time, I discovered I was pregnant. When I told him, his immediate response was to demand that I terminate the pregnancy quietly in Switzerland. It would interfere with his political ambitions, he said. The room was absolutely still now, hanging on every word. I refused. James threatened to reveal certain financial irregularities he'd discovered in the Thompson Foundation's past. Irregularities that could have destroyed not just our family's reputation, but the Foundation's ability to help people who depended on it. She looked directly at James. So I made a choice. I told my family I'd lost the baby, broke off our engagement, and retreated from society for several months. When I returned, I threw myself into structuring the foundation, ensuring it was ethically unassailable. Marcus stared at Claire, understanding dawning in his eyes. The timing of her pregnancy, her immediate connection to him, her determination to challenge social barriers. Everything clicked into place. Yes, James is technically the biological father of my child, Claire continued, her voice growing stronger. But Marcus is this baby's true father in every way that matters. He's the one who helped me find the courage to live authentically. He's the one who showed me that real love isn't about maintaining appearances or protecting power. It's about building something meaningful together. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, unexpectedly, William Thompson stood up. I knew, he announced. I knew everything. I watched my granddaughter choose integrity over ease, watched her transform our foundation into something truly meaningful, watched her find real love instead of settling for convenient alliance. He turned to face James. The Wellington Group's threats mean nothing now. We've already survived the worst you could do, and we've emerged stronger. One by one, people began to stand. Margaret Thompson, Darnell, Elena Ramirez, community leaders, society matrons, even some of the Wellington Group's board members. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. James Wellington III stood alone. His power play transformed into a public demonstration of exactly the kind of old guard thinking Claire had been working to overcome. Marcus took Claire's hand, squeezing it gently. You never needed to tell me, he said softly. No, Claire agreed, because you never needed me to be anything other than who I am. That's what real love looks like. As they stood together at the podium, Claire felt her baby kick, a strong, decisive movement. Like the child knew it was time to break free from the last weights of the past, ready to be born into a world where authenticity trumped appearance, where love defied boundaries, and where the only walls that mattered were the ones they chose to break down together. The end.